Welcome back to the Power 2 here on College Football Addiction. TJ Pittinger, Cole Thompson, Tom Hannifan. And I don't do this a lot to start shows, but I will tell you, if you watch this live, if you watch this on replay, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. I think, I could be wrong on this. I'll go back and look. Probably should have looked already. I think this is actually our 1-year anniversary. How crazy is that?
Is it today or tomorrow? I thought it was tomorrow.
So last year, oh no, I take that back. Last year we started on, well, let me back it up. This is great for live. But this gets clipped anyway, so it's all good.
This is so us. It's so us. It's adorable.
Somebody will tell us in the comments.
I just want you guys to know, in roughly a year of us doing this is far and away my favorite experience talking about college football. The fact that we got to have a little, field trip to Nashville, Tennessee to see Montana State versus Illinois State for the FCS title was incredible. I hope we do that every single year. I hope they hold the game in Nashville every single year. That'd be great.
Yeah, you hope that.
Until our Montana State comes up to the FBS.
Right.
Then we will just buy season tickets to that.
That's true. Yes.
I'll fly up there.
No, February 19th last year.
For tomorrow.
Because of the
great.
Yeah, it literally is. Tomorrow's the 1-year anniversary, but I don't think we're coming back tomorrow unless, maybe FSU will fire Mike Norvell and we'll have a party. But,
we're doing a 4-hour extravaganza.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'll just live stream from now until you guys pop in the live stream whenever you want. Like it might be on this channel, it might be on another one, but just same link, just pop in. But yeah, 1 year. This has been a fun year.
It's been a joy. It's been a blessing. Continue to hit the subscribe button as we grow towards 50,000 and then 100,000. And then Shannon Terry has to give us the respect and say that we are one of the most popular podcasts in America. So, either way, that's just it. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you catch me slipping, I apologize for today's show. Naturally, we know what is happening today. If you eat your Swedish meatballs and you go to IKEA, you're a terrible individual. Nobody belongs in your happiness. So I'm paying attention to what's going on between Czechia and Canada right now.
When you said you're a terrible individual, I thought you were going to say that you were a terrorist. I thought you were going to say if you were Sweden, you're a terrorist, which
that's a little too mean.
At 3 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to say it's okay. I'm going to say it's okay for that to be your take.
Listen, just because if you have furniture that sometimes is really frustrating to put together, doesn't make you a terrorist. It just makes you Swedish. That's all.
Yeah.
Morg.
I'm all jacked up. I'm not quite on Cole's level, but I went. Have you guys had? We'll really get into the show here in a minute.
Yeah.
Have you guys had swig? Is that a thing in Nashville and Houston?
Oh dear God! Like they opened up one by Kirsten's school about 2 months ago, and I tell her all the time, "Bring me home a swig. Just have no ice in it."
Yeah.
So I get the cherry bomb all the time, and I just wait for her to come home and I dump it over ice.
It's a craft soda place, Tom. I guess is the best way to describe it. Like a coffee, So
I'm shocked you don't have it in Nashville of all places.
I'm still new. I'm still figuring it out. So that's the first time I'd ever heard of that brand.
Yeah, there is one in Brentwood.
Okay, so you're right.
A little bit of a drive. Yeah, I can figure that out though.
Another one in Murfreesboro
for a day trip. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah,
you need to go.
Let's go up there just to have In-N-Out and swig with Tom. Although I was looking, we had such a good time in Nashville. Maybe we should do Houston next time. But I was like, man, over the summer, the kids would be like, we should just go back up to Nashville and do it again.
Right.
But yeah, so I had a swig before this. I had the buttery beer, which is, similar to like a butter beer at Harry Potter World or whatever, cream soda essentially. But so I'm all jacked up. So since we're all jacked up, and talking about the most jacked up sport in America right now, let's jump into Ole Miss. Cole, we'll start with you. Okay, so we know the Trinidad news. We understand that, and we can talk about that angle too. But what I really do want to hear from you is, I think that the SEC is as wide open as it's ever been. I know that Georgia is expected to be there. I know that Texas is expected to rebound and have a better year, although 9-3, maybe not the worst, just a little below their expectation for what they did. Where does Ole Miss fall with Trinidad coming back and the pieces they brought in, Pete Golding, that offensive staff that is going to be there next year? What is the realistic ceiling for Ole Miss with the Trinidad news?
Yeah, it's back to being in the college football playoff and competing for an SEC title. I mean, I view it as Deuce Knight would have been fine as a starting quarterback. I think he would have worked really well in John David Baker's offense. But we're probably talking about an 8-4 season, maybe 9-3, depending on how well you're able to work the transfer portal. Well, now you have to add it in the 2-win theory. And the 2-win theory for me is you get a player, he's worth 2 wins. That's Trinidad Chambliss for you. So whatever your preconceived notion was at the start of the season, 7-5, 8-4, 9-3, add 2 more wins to that because of what you got coming back at quarterback. Chambliss is that difference maker. He really is. And you throw in the ability to just play backyard football, keep drives alive, momentum with his legs, not an elite runner, but still a good enough runner to be able to create separation. They're bringing in an offensive coordinator of John David Baker that was on the staff with Lane Kiffin before he got the job at ECU to become the offensive play caller out there. This feels like that all you're doing is you're taking the offense from last season that worked for Charlie Wise Jr. and giving it a new design. It's still the same model. It's still the same ideas. It's still the same prop. Like, think of it like a recasting, like in a movie. Like, okay, it's the same character. He's still going through the same pathway in the hero's arc, but instead of Tommy Lee Jones playing it, now it's Christopher Plummer. Like that's what we're talking about when it comes to John David Baker and Charlie Wise. You still have a solid offensive line. I like the tight end room. I think that you did a good job of keeping Luke Haas. I think that Brady Prieskorn could be a really solid playmaker. I think that having depth at the defense, at the running back position behind Keywan Lacey is awesome. I like the wide receivers you went out and you brought in. I think that Jonte Cook can be a superstar. I think that you bring in a Darren Gill Jr. He could be a solid playmaker number 2. You still have guys like Caleb Odom on the roster. You still have Caleb Cunningham on the roster. And defensively, I think that you got to give a little bit of credit here. Yeah, it wasn't the elite of elite defenses last year, but it still was a solid defense. And you are going to have to replace a player such as Prince Wilton and Manley Ellen and TJ Daugherty, but that's why you go out and you add in the Clemson linebacker to where everyone's having a panic attack over. So, I think that you talk about just this overall identity of Ole Miss. They weren't going to fall off a cliff next season. I don't know if they would still be the same elite team that we envision them to be, but you brought it up. There's a lot of challenging processes for the SEC. It's a 9-game conference schedule. Georgia has to go on the road and face off against some qualified teams. Alabama could be taking a step on back. We don't know what to make of Tennessee right now without Joey Aguilar. So why not Ole Miss? Why should anybody believe that Ole Miss, with the return of a quarterback that probably would be in New York City if he had started the first 2 games of the regular season, with him coming on into the fold, and you have the same running back, and you have the same ideology offensively, what's there to envision that a 9-3 season can't be possible, or a 10-2 season, or better yet, you talk about a team that maybe even makes a run to Atlanta in the first year of the post-Lane Kiffin era?
We know what the hype is going to be around Arch because we lived it last year.
Yeah.
But is Trinidad QB1 in the SEC right now in your eyes?
Yeah. And he was QB1 before I think he was even gone. Like, I got in arguments with people when I made my top 10 rankings, and they said, why would you have Trinidad on the list? Because I think that he's going to get the waiver proven. I think that he will get the appeal in his favor. He didn't get the appeal in his favor, but he did get the waiver to come on back. So now the NCAA is making sure that they kind of have to cross off everything, but I do think he will be playing. You have a guy that is proven. I think the biggest thing that you look at with Arch was everyone said that he was supposed to be the second coming of Tim Tebow. He was supposed to be the greatest quarterback prospect to ever exist. And we hadn't seen him play. At least when it comes to Trinidad Chambliss, there is a baseline of what to expect with him. Now, he may take a few things back, and some defensive coordinators may figure him out in a couple of ways. But overall, it's very hard not to envision a quarterback that is going to be playing in a similar offensive concept and also just have the opportunity to be a backyard football mauler. Why wouldn't he be QB1? There's a legit conversation I think to have that he could be QB1 in the SEC, and not just that, but QB1 in college football.
I so disagree. We are completely disrespecting Gunnar Stockton within the SEC.
Fair.
I look at consistency at the quarterback position. Who's been the most consistent quarterback in the SEC, arguably, over the last 2 years? Gunnar Stockton. Is there a higher athletic ceiling with Trinidad Chambliss? Absolutely. Does Arch Manning also have potentially greater overall quarterback skills and potential? Yes, but to the points we all just made, it's yet to be realized. It's all the hype and the potential. So I'll believe it when I see it with Arch. Gunnar Stockton is the best quarterback in the SEC entering 2026. I don't even see how it's an argument. And here's the thing about Trinidad Chambliss. I love what his game is. I think this makes Ole Miss a credible SEC championship contender, certainly a college football playoff contender, even a national championship contender. I have LSU, Ole Miss, Georgia, and Texas as the 4 teams within the SEC that I think can make it. However, Trinidad Chambliss and Ole Miss, they had some freaking miracles against Georgia in the college football playoff. Chambliss especially. That didn't happen in the semifinal, okay? You need to figure out a way as a quarterback, Trinidad Chambliss, to not be reliant on Johnny Manziel miracles. You need to be more consistent. So that's why I push back on the QB1 thing.
Sure.
And this might be Cole's take, though. If they had did Lacey get hurt in the Ole Miss game or the Georgia game?
Lacey got hurt
in the Miami game or Georgia game.
Lacey was dinged against two.
Lacey was dinged up against both. But Lacey got hurt for the most part in the Miami game.
To Tom's devil's advocate, with a more consistent running game, they may not have needed that. Fair. With just finishing a little bit better. Right, like they drove the ball into Georgia. They were down 9 at the half. They should have been winning that game at the half. So I do agree with what Tom's saying. The hero ball, eventually you run out of luck.
Yes.
But not all of that is on Trinidad's shoulders. Had they played a little bit better defense, had they finished a little better, had they made some kicks, he wouldn't have needed to go God mode in that game. And we might view it a little bit differently, but Tom is still right. Like, I'm not pushing back hard there.
No, I understand what you're saying. Like, there was a spree at the end of the Georgia game where Trinidad had just had prayer after prayer that just worked out. And then against Miami, you ran into the best defense, arguably the best defense that was still playing in the sport at that time. They took away the run game. Yes, we can point towards Kuwan Lacey being injured. I was just saying it a moment ago, he was dinged up against Tulane. He was dinged up during the season, so he had his injury issues. But Miami was like, we're going to take away your best threat, which is Lacey, and we're going to put this all on Trinidad Chambliss. And it worked. Chambliss is not an elite processor just yet. So, again, I don't think it's a conversation. It's Gunnar Stockton as the number 1 SEC quarterback in all of college football. I don't know. I'd have to have a longer think on that one. But
well, I mean, I'm getting flack for saying that Darren Mentz is QB1 going into 2026 because of now he's playing for Miami. And it's like, why? It's like, guys, I thought he was a top 5 quarterback going into this year no matter what. Right. I respect where you come from on the Gunnar Stockton take. What I look at is if I need one drive to where everything can go my way, what Trinidad Chambliss does just is improbable. And I think that's the wild card. Like, there are things that you love about Gunnar Stockton: consistency, timing, accuracy, footwork, not afraid to tuck and run, physicality. He comes from that blue collar mental state of, I am going to do everything in my power to get that first down, which is why I think he is a top 7 quarterback returning in college football. And anywhere below that is absolute asinine. But I think that when you have to factor in anything can happen, including a all-out blitz that comes your way, who do I think is going to be able to evade that pressure more? It's Trinidad. And I think that's what gives me the slight nod over a guy like Gunnar Stockton. Stockton's a fine answer. I won't push back if you have him as your QB1 in the SEC. But knowing that I can get that tomfoolery to go my way, and it constantly just feels like it always is going your way, that is just where I think that Trinidad wins over everybody. I think he wins over everybody in college football with that standpoint.
Let's get some love here for my buddy Eric. Hope you guys are doing well. Started a new job, been busy, but always here in spirit, no matter what. Love the videos always. Eric, we've been at about once a week just because the news has been slower. So maybe it hasn't been you missing us. Maybe it's been us missing you. But we do appreciate the love, as always, all those in the comments. And again, a reminder that if you're watching this on X or Twitter, go over to YouTube and hit the subscribe button on College Football Addiction. I actually just looked at the numbers, and like 83%, we really don't push subscribers hard. Like, I do a lot of videos and never even mention, like, hit the subscribe button, just because as long as you keep watching, I don't care if you're subscribed or not. But like 83% of people are not subscribed that watch the channel. That's an insane number. And if you guys would,
with your finger.
Yeah. If the 83% that watch, and I know that, you know, not all of them are going to watch this video today, but if the 83% subscribed, I mean, we'd hit 100K. Like that's just what it would be. When we're at 40 now, or just short. Let's
and then we could retire. We'd still do the show for fun.
Yeah.
We could retire on it.
We retire from the other BS that we have to do. So, all right, let's move to, shockingly, the ACC. Tom, you get to go first here, and we'll go round table with it. But James Franklin takes over at Virginia Tech. Their schedule's manageable. I know we'll talk about that. They obviously brought a lot of guys over from Penn State that are very talented. And it's an ACC that feels like it's Miami and everybody else. There's certainly a who is going to be the team to face, at least as of today on February 18th. It feels like it's who is Miami going to face in Charlotte. And I know they've had their ACC struggles and they've never won the thing, but it does feel like it's their conference and then who's going to go and challenge. I don't know if it's too lofty to put Virginia Tech in that conversation, but I just don't know that there's another ACC team that you would feel great enough about to say they certainly are. I think SMU, I think Louisville will be good. Maybe Clemson or Florida State could turn it around. Those are talented programs. But I think Virginia Tech's just kind of in that next tier, maybe behind SMU in Louisville. So what are your thoughts on Virginia Tech and Franklin this year?
I'm very curious to see how this team just looks and feels, in that, as someone who went to Penn State and covers Penn State football, part of the greatest conference in the sport right now, the Big Ten, and oddly speaking, on the third best conference right now. I think Virginia Tech, to all the points you just made, has the chance to be competitive and to have a winning record this year and to make a respectable bowl game. I think that's a reasonable expectation for fans in Blacksburg. To your point, looking at their schedule, they open up against the juggernauts known as VMI, then Old Dominion. You're at Maryland in your third game of the season, ironically a Big Ten opponent that James Franklin hates to its core. He holds a grudge from many years ago, having worked there and not getting the head coaching job.
It's an old Big East matchup, is it not?
Kind of, yeah, honestly.
Yeah, like, come on, like it was it was a Big East, and it was an ACC. Now it's an out-of-conference match.
I know. Conference realignment is terrible. But the Maryland game is your first credible opponent of the year, and that's not a slam dunk, I think, in either direction. I think that's a coin flip. At Boston College, that remains to be seen. Against Pittsburgh, a team, ironically, that James Franklin avoided for years when he was in Happy Valley, going all the way out to Cal, getting used to the coast-to-coast travel. Virginia Tech fans, you will hear James Franklin complain about the distance from campus to the airport in Roanoke, which is about 45 minutes away. The State College Airport was roughly 10 minutes away, but the runway wasn't big enough. So you're going to hear James Franklin say the word obviously and airport a lot this season. You'll play at home against Georgia Tech. I think that's a challenging game in and of itself. At Clemson, kind of the points you were saying before, like, I don't really know. Is this the last gasp of Dabo this year? At SMU, not an easy game. Against Stanford. At Miami, I'm going to chalk that up as a loss based on what Miami is probably going to put on the field this year. And then you play Virginia. There's 5, maybe 6 losses on this schedule. Like at least 6 games that you could say are 50-50. It's a coin flip. And I would say a lock that they lose to Miami and that they lose to Georgia Tech. But you're going to be competitive on the field. And I think the misconception about James Franklin going to Virginia Tech is that, man, he just brought all these great Penn State players with him. He did bring some talent with him, but he brought a lot of fringe starters with him. A lot of people were like, wow, he got Ethan Grunkemeyer, who was the starting quarterback the back half of the season after Drew Aller broke his ankle and James Franklin had been fired. Grunkemeyer played well. There's actually no guarantee that Grunkemeyer is going to be the starting quarterback for Virginia Tech. There's going to be a competition at that position. Luke Reynolds is another guy who pops out at tight end that I think could be productive for them and be a starter. He was their number 2 tight end at Penn State. He didn't necessarily go and get starters and guys who are going to be future first-round NFL draft picks. He got the bulk of the recruiting class Penn State was expecting for the class of 2026. So Virginia Tech fans, I think, are prepared to be patient and see this team develop because they've struggled for so long. But I think James Franklin is going to be able to put a winning team on the field and make a bowl game this year. I defer to you guys in terms of the rest of the ACC and how the roster shakes out as it looks at this point. But I think it's going to be a challenging schedule. It's favorable to your points, but there's still credibly 5 to 6 losses, in my opinion, on their schedule.
They could start, to me, there's already hype because, first of all, Virginia Tech, when they're up and rolling, I mean, we've seen them in national championships. We've seen them with Mike Vick. And then you add in James Franklin coming from Penn State. Like, that creates excitement. And, again, like we talked about, with kind of a wide open second through 86, how many teams are in this uneven schedule conference. The start could be really good. And, you're almost assuming that something would have to go chaotically wrong for them to not start 2-0. I think they've got a good chance to go and win at Maryland. And then I think they've got a good chance to go and win at BC. Like, they've got a decent chance to start this thing 4-0. I also think Pitt lost a lot. And I think that they'd have a chance to go and win a game at home against Pitt. And then the cross-country stuff is always tough. I think there's a real chance they start this schedule 4-2, 5-1. And then the back half gets a lot meatier. You mentioned Georgia Tech. As bad as Clemson has been or is up in the air, on the road is always very tough. Virginia will be good. Miami will be good. Louisville, not Louisville, SMU. There's a lot in that back half that you're like, man, you could really sustain some losses. But if the thing is rolling in the right direction and you do start 5-1 or, God forbid, 6-0 with Georgia Tech coming in, Georgia Tech with a new quarterback, new offensive coordinator, a lot of changes there, and no Haynes King to run into the dirt and save you, that's not unheard of. Like, that would be probably, if you go into that game 4-2, 5-1, that's probably a night game in Blacksburg, which is a lot better than having to go down to Bobby Dodd. So I don't know. I think that it is very challenging, but they could start really, really well. If they don't start really well and they don't win at Maryland, and then they've got, Pitt maybe didn't lose as much as we think. Like, yeah, they could start 3-3, and then you're looking at the back half like, all right, we're fighting for a bowl game when we play Virginia at the end of the year. But the start to me is so key. Cole?
What I just think of, a couple things. Number one, James Franklin's biggest fault was going up against the big boy teams, going up against Ohio State, going up against Michigan. Couldn't win those ones. There's not a Michigan, there's not an Ohio State in the ACC outside of maybe Miami. And again, it's this iteration of Miami. For what history has said, you don't really have a juggernaut. Maybe Clemson's good at one point. Maybe you'll see a little bit of love for North Carolina. But overall, it very much is not that big game. So you don't have to worry about that standpoint. I think that one thing that James Franklin did a really good job at least offensively for a new standard, was keeping a lot of the players that he thought were difference makers for the team that were going to be retained. One of the biggest ones I thought was Aiden Green, the wide receiver. Really solid playmaker on the outside that can go ahead and I think work in this brand new offense. He kept both Marcellus Hawkins at running back and Jeffrey Overton. He also kept Gosnell, the tight end. So he figured out, I'm going to bring in some players that fit my system at Penn State, but I'm going to retain some players that were really good for Virginia Tech and were kind of the standouts of a team that went and underachieved expectations. I think hiring Brent Pry, while I find it a little weird that you want to go back to the place that said you're not going to be our head coach, is different. He at least is going to have himself a guy that he can trust to run the defense accordingly, so his entire focus can be on building a roster for the long term. And then the schedule does benefit him in a lot of ways, because the thing about the ACC is you can have back-to-back weeks of cross-Atlantic flights to where you're in 3 different time zones, and that doesn't happen. They have one back-to-back road game where they're in Clemson, Eastern time zone, to then going down to Dallas where they're in Central time zone. They don't have to travel. When they travel out to Cal, they get a home game the following week against Georgia Tech, and they get a home game the week before that against Pitt. You don't have to face off against a Louisville team. You don't have to face off against a hopefully revamped North Carolina team, potentially a promising Wake Forest team. And a lot of your tough games, you get to kind of welcome them at home. So, I think that's kind of a beneficiary as well. The Miami game is one that you got to go ahead and say, probably chalk it up as a loss, but the one caveat that you can always throw in when it comes to James Franklin is he's been able to build programs, and he's been able to turn them into at least what we envision underneath his watch, sustainability. Vanderbilt, I think, would have been a constant 8-win team if he would have stayed in Nashville and not taken the Penn State job. Penn State, what did we talk about them? They were a constant Tier 2 roster, but they were the only Tier 2 roster in the Big Ten, because there was a complete drop-off after Penn State and a certain hierarchy when it came to Michigan and Ohio State. I think that you're going to see continuity be built at a place like Virginia Tech so long as James Franklin's there. 9 wins I don't think is impossible. I don't think it's impossible to say that an 8-win season is a very good start. And as long as you're able to now go recruit the area like the DMV where DC is, and as long as you're able to continue to build a good footpath throughout the entire southeastern region of the United States, Franklin has a very good opportunity to turn Virginia Tech back into the team that people were intimidated by underneath Frank Beamer, intimidated by when you heard Enter Sandman at Lane Stadium, intimidated to go play on a Friday night or a Saturday night out in Blacksburg. I think that he can be that type of coach, and you have a good foundation, I think, already set in motion with who's on your staff and what you were able to return.
To your point about the staff, I'm curious, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Ty Howell is going to be the offensive coordinator. Ty Howell was the tight ends coach at Penn State and did a really good job with that position. Multiple times when Penn State had transitioned at offensive coordinator, he was never given the job. He would be given the job in the event that an offensive coordinator was fired or left the program, and it was like, hey, we need you to cover a few games or a bowl game. So clearly he was never James Franklin's top choice to be a coordinator. I think he'll do a fine job, but this is going to be a very traditional James Franklin offense. It's going to be 11, 12, 13 personnel at times. He's going to want to run the football, and you might not see a ton of downfield passing. He's going to lean on his tight ends. He's going to run the football. Brent Pry is still one of the more fascinating stories in college football. Is the guy who was fired middle of the season by Virginia Tech and then rehired by new head coach James Franklin at Virginia Tech. Brent Pry has a fantastic track record as a defensive coordinator, has a fantastic track record of working with James Franklin at multiple schools. So I expect them to be successful. And I think that's been the hallmark of Virginia Tech football for many, many years is you play outstanding defense and you are aggressive on special teams. I think that's something that's really going to excite Hokie fans if they can deliver on that side of the ball. And I see no reason why Brent Pry won't deliver on that side. I guess the large question is just like, okay, how many wins are they able to rack up? Because to the point that Coles is making, if you get to like 8 or 9 wins after what they've had the last few years, they'll build a statue next week.
How do you guys feel just in overall general vicinity of going back to the place that fired you for demotion? Because this is now the second time it's happened in recent memory. Because Vance Joseph, who currently is the defense coordinator for the Denver Broncos, was fired mid-season by Denver and now is just calling their defense.
I think there's been a trend, Cole, and I want to hear what TJ thinks about this, but there's been a trend with this era of the transfer portal and NIL. Head coaches don't want to deal with the BS as much anymore. Gary Patterson is the defensive coordinator out at USC now, if I'm not mistaken. So
USC.
Very, very capable of being a head coach anywhere in America. They don't want to deal with the BS. Arthur Smith is going from the National Football League to Ohio State to be the offensive coordinator because they're like, I just want to coach the position. I just want to call plays. And there are more and more programs that are allowing coordinators to just be coordinators and not have to be hitting the recruiting trail like madmen and having a horrible schedule. And then here's the other just like real basic human thing. What was Brent Pry making as a head coach? And now what's he making as a defensive coordinator? And did James Franklin be like, hey, you're my guy. I'm going to take care of you. So if both of those numbers were in the 7 figures, it's really not that bad, is it? Because you don't have to move your family. Your office is going to change within the same building. Not bad. It's got to be a shot to your ego, but all things considered, like, could be a lot worse.
I don't know. Just my ego, I think, would get in the way of it. Like, you fired me and said I wasn't good enough. And then just for good measure, you go and hire the guy who recommended me for this job to begin with. Like, I don't know if I'd ever be able to go back to that.
If anything, it's Pry just kind of saying F you to the university because Franklin and him, Virginia Tech didn't hire him. James Franklin hired him. You know what I mean?
To be fair, though, here's my bigger question. Is he getting the buyout and also a contract?
That's what I just wanted to know. How does your... I mean, it just depends on the contract, but like, does the offset language count if it's your own university paying the money?
You owe him a new contract.
Yeah.
That's his head coach contract. This is now his defense coordinator contract.
I don't know how that works, but the offset isn't enough. Like, it's not enough to matter because as a coordinator, what are you making? 1.5, 2, somewhere in that range, probably. I have no clue what his contract is.
He's got to be making at least $1 million.
Like, I forget what his deal was at Virginia Tech as the head coach, and I'm sure it's out there publicly. But even if he's making $1 million as defensive coordinator, who wouldn't take that? That's not bad. And and that's the thing. Like, he was probably making what, 7-ish as a head coach. I mean, this is all Googleable. Like, but the point remains: when you get fired and you get paid what 85% of that buyout, they owe you $5.5 million roughly. And then you make $1 million, so $1 million comes off of that. But
they're already paying him that $1 million. So like he's still getting his head coach, basically still getting his head coach salary to coach defensive coordinators and not have to deal or to be a coordinator. And not have to deal with being a head coach in this mess that it is right now. And we talked, I mean, you were asking the question of like thoughts around it. I mean, that is literally what Gus said when he got to Florida State. And I know he's no longer there, but he literally said like, yeah, man, I just want to coach football. I'm just a football coach. And he didn't say like, I hate all these kids now and I hate dealing with them and all that stuff publicly. But that was his mindset. It was like, I just want to coach football. And so, yeah, I mean, Brent Pry's still making a lot of money to just be a coordinator because of the buyout. So
do you want to coach for the team that said, screw you, you suck as a coach, we don't like you, but you do like your buddy and we're going to go hire him? That's where the ego comes in for me.
I think that's the nature of the business, though. Coaches get hired to get fired. You're leasing an office. You're not there permanently. And James Franklin has learned that. Here's a greater question that I have for TJ. Say Mike Norvell gets fired amidst 2026 or after 2026. Is James Franklin one and done at Virginia Tech? Because it's very well reported he wanted that Florida State job.
I mean, I guess it would depend on how he does this year, right? If they do anything better than 6-6, I would think that Florida State would. Here's the thing: I was told people at Florida State didn't want him, and that's why he didn't end up there. I don't know if that was like a we don't like him in totality or we don't like him enough to bite the bullet. Like they liked Lane enough to bite the bullet. Right. Not that they were ever seriously in that conversation, but like if they could have been in that conversation for Lane, I think they would have bit the bullet and hired him. If it's James Franklin or some up and coming group of 5 coach, and let's say James does go 9-3 this year, 8-4, I think you'd be kind of dumb not to go look in that direction.
You'd be dumb not to make the phone call.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, well, let's just also call it as is. What if he does a really good job at Virginia Tech and Virginia Tech is a job to where he's getting paid a lot of money. The expectations are realistic because of where they've been. And he wants to kind of reinvent his image to where Florida State might be a great job, maybe a premier job in the ACC, but you never know if Alabama's going to come calling. You never know if Ohio State's going to open on up. You never know what else is going to be available. Yeah. So do I just want to jump around or do I stay here and cash on him when finally the big job opens? Because the thing that I could see 2 years from now, if he still is failing to meet expectations, West Coast USC.
I mean, we've talked about Sark, leaving. Could Texas open? There's a lot of places out there. And I think this revolving door, I've made this point before. The idea of like, oh, Florida State shouldn't hire because the coaching carousel is crowded this year. Man, I am not telling you that I think every year is going to be as crazy as this year was. And the Lane aspect of this year made the carousel crazier than it probably really was, like that mess. And then you had the Sharon Moore stuff. And yes, it was just all a circus. So I'm not telling you that it's going to be that level of like a Lane or Sharon or things like that happening. But with colleges putting $20 million extra into rosters, like minimum, right? Like that's just the rev share part of it. And then some of these colleges putting like $30 and $40 million in. I think your timeline as a coach and then Curt Cignetti turning Indiana around in 2 years. I think your timeline as a coach is getting shortened. Like the average coach is in the SEC for like less than 4 years. Like it's 3 years in a couple of months. So I think that is going to get tightened up. And I do think we see a kind of again, not a 2025 level, but I think we could see a pretty crazy carousel more years than not. And I think expectations are too high. The playoff is only getting bigger and your roster cost is only getting bigger. That artificially inflates expectations. There are now, instead of 2 or 3 teams that can win a title, there might be 10 or 12, but the expectations are that there are 40 teams that can win a title. And that's just not reality. But with the investment that these programs are making into their teams, they ain't putting up. I mean, shoot, LSU fired Brian Kelly and had a great record. These teams are not waiting around. And so I think we're going to see crazy carousels every year. Again, maybe not to the level of this last season, but I don't think this idea of like, oh, this was a one-off. I think this is coming every season. So we'll see. Let's do this. Let's give Sleeper some love. And on the other side, we'll come back and we'll let Cole be a fanboy for a minute. So here we go. If you are already using Sleeper for fantasy and DFS, there's something new you should know about. Sleeper just rolled out Team Picks, a new way to make game level predictions instead of focusing on individual players. With team picks, you're simply choosing outcomes for full games. For example, there's college basketball going on all around us. There's the UEFA Champions League, which I'm going to go and pick today. Make sure that you go check that out. You'll see the matchup listed and the team multiplier next to each team winning or losing. No lineups, no player props, just the teams and the game outcome. It's all laid out very clearly in the app so you can see the matchup, the multipliers, and decide which side you like or don't like. That part's up to you. If you already have the Sleeper app, go check it out in the app. And if you don't, Sleeper still has fantasy, DFS, and team picks all now in one place. Go check them out. Cole, you're high on Florida. Let's talk about it.
Ah, boy. Well, I would have been high on anywhere that John Summerall went this season. Playing.
Okay, let me interrupt you real quick. Sorry, I just tossed it to you and then I'm going to take it back. Can I tell you as a Florida State fan what I like about John Summerall?
Yes.
He's the most normal in some ways. He's the most normal, down-to-earth human being that you'll ever, as a coach, that you might ever interact with. Right. So my friend Allie had him on the show a week ago today. And we spent maybe 10 minutes just talking with him off air about bourbons he liked. And he told stories about, he's like, don't say this out loud, but like told stories about like different things and just like interacted so well. And I've just been around so many other coaches that are so buttoned up. And I was talking to her about it actually this morning. Just, they feel like their personality feels like they're wearing a tuxedo and they just can't be real. And he is the most real, down to earth, just cool human being that you could ever want. It almost makes me feel bad for how much I'm going to cheer against them this year and every year that, you know, he or anyone else coaches there. But I really like John Summerall, not even from a X's and O's, execution, accountability, discipline, not even from those. I think he'll do fine with all that. And I have tweeted, I was more worried about Summerall going there than I was Lane, because I think you kind of knew what you were getting with Lane. I just, from the human side of things, like even as a rival, I was like, dude, this guy is so cool. And I always thought Napier was a nerd. Like I never thought Napier, you know, like he had the personality of, you know, that Diet Dr. Pepper can there. Maybe a little less because I'm a big Diet Dr. Pepper fan if you guys would like to sponsor the show. But I really like John Summerall. Like you're not going to catch me saying negative things about this guy. I mean, maybe for 3 hours on Saturdays, but I really liked him. So you brought him up first. So that's where I wanted to cut you off and just say, like, from a personality standpoint, this guy is, I don't know, he's so legit. I think that's going to resonate well with recruits too, just again, to my own detriment. But Cole, I'll actually shut up now and let you talk.
Like for me, the big thing was I was high on Florida last season. I think that Florida had a good roster and I've always given Billy the benefit of the doubt, but I more so was based off of what he did as a play caller and what he was able to accomplish during his time in Louisiana. The way I speak about Billy Napier is a way of I have a respect for the game of college football. The way I speak about John Summerall is my son is 18 years old and about ready to go sign on the dotted line. He's going to go play for John Summerall. He's just built different. And I have been high on him since he got hired at Troy. The accomplishments that he's been able to continue to build in a day and age of college football where you're always having to go into the transfer portal, always developing talent and watching it leave to go to greener pastures. And to be able to find names that constantly are able to be pushing forward and keeping you in good chatter about being a playoff team, I think has led to the point of where he could have gone to LSU, he could have gone to Ohio State, he could have gone to Michigan. I would have said it was the hire of the offseason. That's how much I love John Summerall, how good I think he is. And he goes to Florida. And Florida gets the hire right, in my opinion. And I know that it's so easy to say this because we always feel like that Florida gets the hire right. They did it with Jim McElwain. They did it with Dan Mullen. They did it with Will Muschamp. They did it with Billy Napier. We were all high on these guys. It's like, yeah, but you need a level of psychotic mentality to go be the head coach of Florida right now. Because you're closer to being irrelevant than you are to being a team that was viewed as a national title contender. If we're just being completely honest. And when you talk to John Summerall and you see the way he goes about practice and you hear the stories about his former players and what they had to endure through summer months, through off-season workouts, it's like having a guy that's juiced up on Red Bull but also has a loose screw in his head that's just rattling around. Like, that's the mentality that you have, and you need that psychotic mental state to be in a position where we don't really care what people are saying about us on the outside. We don't really care if people are hyping us up or if they're saying that it's a one and done, or we've heard this story before about you go hire the G5 hotshot coach from Louisiana to come on into the swamp and underachieve. We don't care what that message is. Here's my message. Go to work, do your damn job, earn your stripes, and if you don't, get the hell off my football field. That's what you're getting in John Summerall, and he did a hell of a job, I think, of building up this coaching staff. I love that he brought Joe Craddock in, but he said that Joe Craddock is going to be my quarterback's coach. I'm getting a proven play caller, and I'm going to get the one that everybody said Georgia should have hired over a Mike Bobo, and that would be Buster Faulkner. I love the fact that he is a defensive-minded guy, but he's saying, you know what, Brad White is somebody who's called plays before and has done it at a high-end level. I'm going to go hire him. And then to be able to retain so many of the key names on the roster on both sides of the football, I think was a massive win for just setting the new standard of what is Florida football. So all the things that we are hearing from the offseason, you look at, you say, John Summerall has this team trending in the right direction. John Summerall has this team mentally preparing itself for what is going to be a crucial year in a day and age where it's a 9-game conference schedule. Every change that comes this way could factor into how we view teams for the long haul. And I think the biggest takeaway is that when we see John Summerall and the Gators walk out of the swamp, week 1 against, I believe it's FAU, they're going to be so mentally prepared and feral, ready to hit somebody, that might make them one of the more intimidating teams. Like, there have been rosters before where they're just sick and tired of going through the motions and having to go through practices and drills and concepts. And there's like, just put the football down and let me smack somebody that's not my teammate. I think that that's what John Summerall is preparing his team for. And once they start winning, best of luck. Stay the hell out of their way.
And we've talked about this. It's not quite like the ACC, but the SEC is with, I don't want to compare it to the ACC in the same way, but it is open, man. Like, it just is. And because there's so much talent spread around everywhere in the SEC, like, it is not unfathomable to think that Florida could get back really quickly. Now, I don't have them at like over 8 wins this year. I think the schedule still sets up tough. I think there's going to be some transition. We'll see what Philo looks like. I think that's was a good pickup, and the familiarity with Faulkner is a big deal. Obviously, you bring back RB1 or 2 in the league, if based on what you thought of Lacey last year. But I do think that, man, there's a lot of talent on this team. Their wideouts are probably top 3 in the SEC. I'm not going to pretend to know the entire SEC's wide receiver depth chart like Cole probably does, but their wideouts are elite. I think they brought back some good linebacking and edge talent. Secondary is kind of where I would have some wonders, but man, I think he's a really good coach, and I think the SEC is incredibly tough. And you could be a really good coach and go 8-4 in the SEC because that's that's what happens, right? Like, sometimes you run into better rosters and better talent. I'm interested to see what they look like in rivalry games. I think that's something he'll prioritize because Napier didn't seem to give a crap about them. And I think they're going to be really good. Tom, do you have much on Florida?
I'm to the points you guys said. I like Summerall in general, stepping up from Tulane to Florida. I don't have to explain that to anybody. That's going to be a challenge in general. I think their schedule sets up okay, like favorably. Like, I don't want to say favorably because you've got at Auburn. Like, I'm not entirely sure what Auburn is going to be this year with a new head coach themselves. You play Ole Miss, you're at Texas, you play Georgia at home, you play Oklahoma at home, you end at Florida State, the rivalry game, as we mentioned. So, like, there's some tough games on this schedule. It's like, if you finish around 6-6, 7-5, are the fans in Gainesville going to be pissed? The answer is probably yes. Like, I think they want a winner now, but I also hope there's a reasonable expectation that it's like, this team's not going to make the playoff in 2026, and you're just hoping to make some sort of respectable bowl game. But I think at the end of the day, they're looking to see signs of life offensively, something fun to watch, because the hallmark of the team last year was the defense, despite all the deficiencies of the offense, never quit. It was really impressive to see that the entire time. I think John Summerall is going to put an attitude into this team that hopefully picks up where that defense left off, and it permeates to all 3 phases. But offensively, they've got to put something on the field with Jaden Ball and company that puts butts in seats, like just makes people excited about the team again, because right now this is just not an exciting team.
They had so many weapons last year, and Florida fans I mean, think about the great Florida teams. Not that they weren't good defensively. What did they hold a team to 14 in both of their national championships under Urban? So like they were good defensively too. But like, what did those? I mean, even going back to Spurrier, like they won offense, man. And like if you win championships defensively, like that's fine. I was a Bucs fan, and I don't look back at 2002 and say like, oh man, well I wish I could have scored more points. No, that's fine. If you're going to lose games, at least be exciting. They lost games and they were incredibly boring with like 5 stars everywhere on their offense. And that's what I think. And Billy was an offensive guy. I just think they couldn't take that. And so, yeah, I mean, you look at the schedule, the big 4 of Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, and Ole Miss are incredibly tough. If you can go 1-3 in that, they have a talent advantage over every other team on the schedule. I mean, they should be 3-0 out of conference. I know that their first SEC game is on the road at Auburn. I mean, I'm not picking a game here in February. I mean, I kind of like Florida's roster a little bit better than I like Auburn's right now. Missouri, I kind of like. I know that's on the road again, coming off the Ole Miss game. I kind of like their roster better than Missouri. South Carolina, Kentucky, Vandy, like they should win those games. I mean, I think there's a real chance they can get to 8-4. I think more than that would kind of be a surprise. And at 9-3, they're going to be right on the edge of the playoff conversation. I think 7-5, 8-4 would be a good start for him in a transition type year like this. And I think there's a lot of, there are the big 4, the tough games. There's a lot of very winnable games on this schedule that he can instill a lot of confidence. The 3-game stretch of Texas, bye week, Georgia, Oklahoma, I mean, you kind of need to steal one of those. But then you're going to finish the season on a high note, I think, at Kentucky, against Vandy, and then at Florida State. So I think it's going to end up being pretty good for UF with him.
I think Florida killed it with the hiring of Buster Faulkner. I think Florida made sure that they were able to get the right type of players in via the portal. Eric Singleton, I think everyone has forgotten about of who he is as a playmaker, because if he was in Hugh Freeze's offense, okay, well, now he's back in the offense that made him one of the highest paid wide receivers in the transfer portal period down in Gainesville. So he is now strapping it on up, and he gets to be that veteran presence inside that locker room and take away pressure from Dallas Wilson, who, again, when he was on the field, difference maker, could have had a Malachi Toney type season if he was fully healthy, and Vernell Brown that did a damn good job as a wide receiver 1 without an offensive coordinator for the entire season because Billy was fired. I think the other thing that you really got to look at is John Summerall maybe didn't bring in all the elite names in the portal, but you know what he did do? He made sure the elite names didn't leave via the portal. Tramel Jones has an opportunity to be a really solid quarterback and fight alongside Aaron Philo for first-team reps. That's a guy that would have gotten paid in the portal. Jaden Baugh was underutilized entirely last year, and if given the opportunity, he may end up having the best rushing total in the SEC. He could have gone anywhere in the country. Sticks around with Florida. We already mentioned Vernell Brown. We already mentioned Dallas Wilson. How about on the defensive side? Miles Graham, your leading tackler. He didn't go anywhere this offseason. Cameron James. He didn't go anywhere this offseason. Jaden Woods, the 5-star freshman. He was getting rumored to leave in the offseason. He's not going anywhere. You're not losing your starting safety in Bryce Thornton. You're not losing Kermani McLean to the portal. And these are guys who are now going to learn underneath a defensive guru that was able to have a very solid unit in New Orleans the last 2 years and a very solid unit down at Troy for 2 seasons en route to winning 3 conference title appearances. So as much as I think that Florida didn't maybe bring in all the sexy names or go swing big in the portal like some other teams, Texas Tech, Miami, LSU, what they did was they made sure the guys that were supposed to be foundational pieces for this roster, they didn't hightail on out of there. And I think that that's what makes them such a unique team going into this year, where if you think that 9-3 is impossible, I hate to break it to you. You don't know John Summerall and you don't know his personality. If you don't think that 10-2 is possible, hate to break it to you. You don't know John Summerall and you don't know his personality. I am not ruling out the Gators for 1 second that yes, even though it is a new regime, why are they not going to be viewed as at least a threat if they start off really hot to maybe keep the good times rolling all the way into November?
I thought he was funny in a press conference the other day. He said something like, well, you know, we may lose a game or two while I'm here, but I do hope that you guys will give me the grace. I think he's also setting up expectations pretty well. He said in that same press conference, he said, you know, I'm trying to figure out how to evaluate this roster. I've been here for 7-8 weeks, man. Like, I don't, I don't know how good we're going to be. Like where a lot of coaches come in, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to blah, blah, whatever. He was asked about, how he thought we did in the portal. And he said, well, I think I would love more depth in the trenches. I am trying to figure that out, and see what shakes out. So I like his mindset. I liked him as a person in my limited interaction with him the other day. And, I do think he's going to be really good. So hopefully Cole and I are wrong completely on that.
I hope not. I hope I'm 100% right on that.
My hope is that I'm wrong on that. So I can't take both rivals being that far up while I'm in the gutter. So, all right, we'll fly through these last couple. But 2014 playoff. We're going to comment in the question in the comments here. Is it inevitable? I mean, I'll just tell you. I think the answer to this is yes. I don't know that it's imminent. I'm using $3 words here today, but I do think it's inevitable. I don't foresee a scenario where ESPN looks at the opportunity to add 8 more games and says, "Yeah, we're good on that money." So yeah, I think it will eventually happen. Maybe that means we get rid of conference championship weekend and we have play-in games that weekend. Which, if that could move the schedule up a little bit, I don't want to be an advocate for the 24-teamer, but I do think that would, you could sell me on that a little bit. I think when you look at just look at the ratings. As great as we think the SEC championship game is and have always enjoyed that, as great as 1 versus 2 was in the Big Ten championship, it fell below the ratings for every single college football playoff game, maybe with the exception of like the JMU stuff. So yeah, I think if they can tie the word playoff to it and just make our conference championship games play-in games, they'll do that, and we'll eventually get to it. But thoughts on the 2014 playoff? Let's go Tom first, since he is the rep for the greatest conference that ever existed.
Thank you very much for saying that. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm with you, TJ. This feels inevitable because of the networks and the money, and it just makes a lot of sense. I would like to see the schedule not go so deep into January. If we're going to make this change, can we then figure out a way to end the college football season on New Year's Day the way that the college football gods intended it to end? I would personally love to see the national championship be the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day every single year. So you would have to adjust the calendar. I've heard some coaches talk about, hey, just, instead of this week 0 stupidity, just make it week 1 and back up the calendar just a little bit. You still have one weekend that's completely dedicated to Army, Navy. I've been an advocate for getting rid of championship games for the conferences for a while, because you should just kind of treat it like college basketball in that you have a regular season champion. So that way you don't have they lost in the championship game, even though they qualified for it. We're going to hold that against them. I never understood that. If this kills some of the random bowl games that nobody cares about, and frankly, that players and coaches also don't care about, then you just take that sponsor and you attach it to first round game of the college football playoff X, wherever that may be. If this results in more home on campus college football playoff games, it's a win. I firmly believe there are not 24 teams capable of winning a national championship. I think we can all agree that looking at the field of at least the SEC and the Big Ten that made the 12-team playoff this year, that we were kind of on the fringe with the SEC teams that made it. As some people were like, Oklahoma shouldn't have been in there, or Alabama shouldn't have been in there. Like, they played a competitive game in the first round. You have to give them credit there. But beyond the 4 SEC teams in there, there was not a 5th SEC team that would have gone in there and really shaken things up and made a run at getting to the national title game. Same thing in the Big Ten. There were 3 Big Ten teams, and that was exactly the right number. So now you're going to see,
and probably the Big 12. I know that BYU has an argument, but Notre Dame might be your one exception to all of this. But essentially, 12 is actually probably enough. Sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're right.
We showed that if you'd have put the right teams in, if BYU and Notre Dame would have been in over JMU and Tulane, that'd have been a damn good playoff. Those would have been the 12 teams, maybe with BYU, Alabama, Oklahoma. I don't know that we needed to go to 16, but. Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're right. I think if we're going to go to 24, here are the pros of it. I still don't like the idea, because then you're getting into the middle of the SEC and the Big Ten, teams that are not going to win, but are just going to play. And then you're going to, say it's a world where you do get rid of conference championship games. Then the whole argument we had about Texas Tech and BYU, it's like, well, Tech beat them in the regular season. What if they were both able to give it a run in the playoff? Or what if they met again in the playoff? Then you can have that matchup with more eyeballs on it, higher stakes. I don't have a problem with that. The ACC was kind of a dumpster fire, but obviously we got the runner-up to the national championship, who ironically didn't win the conference. And then there's the whole group of 5 discussion. And that is where this really becomes a nightmare, because now do you start letting in more and more teams like JMU, like Tulane, that are just not going to be competitive, period. And that's my issue with the 24, because you were already going to get that with going to 16. You're getting it now at 12. And the goal should be to have the most competitive field and teams that can credibly win 4 games in a row, 3 games in a row, and get to the national championship. You water down the quality of the playoff, the further this goes down. And oh, by the way, we still need to figure out coaches leaving in the middle of the playoff, players leaving and transferring in the middle of the playoff. You have to figure out contracts. Like the Pandora's box issue just becomes larger, but the television networks make more money. So,
yeah, and I think what it does, I'll throw to Cole here. With some of the play-in games, like I hate to be an advocate for this, some like I call them play-in games, but like that first round of games, because I would imagine there are buys with this 24. That first round of games would maybe be more competitive. I know you talked about more group of 5 teams, but like, for example, this year, if you'd had like, I don't know, who were like Virginia and Tennessee playing in the first round, like that would have been a good game. And it was a good, well, it wasn't the bowl game. No, it was Illinois. But like that would have been a good game in the first round. What you essentially are going to do is you're moving your blowouts to the second round.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and maybe that's bad. Maybe it's not. Not that every game is going to be a blowout, but essentially by expanding it, you give teams buys, and that's fine. But you're moving your blowouts to the second round instead of having them in the first round. And if that's what we end up doing, then that's fine. When Tennessee as the 23 seed beats, whoever, Virginia as the 19 seed, and then they got to go play Ohio State, then we're moving that blowout back around instead of just having it 16 where, Virginia loses to Ohio State in the first round or whatever. So, it would create I didn't really think about this, the carousel and portal madness, like your top 24 teams in the country, essentially like none of the starters, like you would have guys leaving, but they'd be depth guys. You had guys leave from Georgia, in the portal, but they were third string and not going to play and factor into the playoff anyway. But the coaching carousel part of it, like the top 24 coaches, roughly being, how many of them would leave? We already had 3 coaches not coaching the playoff this year or coaching the playoff, but then leave. So yeah, that is a nightmare too. I also think the one other factor, you talked about the group of 5 stuff. I don't know, like North Texas would have been in this year, but they would have been playing like a Virginia, right? So like, I don't know, maybe that would have been competitive, more competitive than, certainly Tulane was against Ole Miss or JMU was against Oregon. So you maybe eliminate some of your group of 5 teams in the first round so that you're not having to see your elite teams play the group of 5 teams. So maybe that is a little bit of a detraction. Maybe it's a little bit of a benefit. I don't know, but that's a thought. Cole?
I'm sorry. I'm not gonna lie to you boys. I've been listening, but I've also been paying attention to what's going on between Canada and Czech and it's the right now. So, there could be an upset brewing between the Leafs. Okay. Number 1, it is dumb. It is dumb. It is dumb that we are expanding 24 teams. Number 2, it is very dumb that we're going to expand to 24 teams. Number 3, you asked for this, ladies and gentlemen, because I said 8. 8 was fine. Because you want to know why 8 was fine? 8 means that we're going to get quality of play. We're going to get the teams that we actually view that can win a national title. And let's just do ourselves a favor for a second. Did any of us here believe that Miami couldn't make a run in the playoff? I didn't. I thought Miami absolutely could make a run in the playoff. Now, would they have been left out because of an 8-team format? Potentially, and that would have been a bummer. But I think that Miami was good enough to win a championship. You want to know who I didn't think was good enough to win a championship? Alabama. You want to know who else I didn't think was good enough to win a championship? Oklahoma. But they got in the playoff. So I'm just saying that there's usually a standpoint of 6 to 7 teams, maybe if you're lucky an 8th team that can win. That's about it. Now we're going to expand to 24 because we already opened up the box and said, hey, look, money. Money speaks. We're getting a lot of it. Let's continue to make more money. And you're killing the dream of the sport because of you. All you want to do is make a quick buck. And the reason I stand behind this is because I don't think that we should glorify 9-3 teams getting on in if they aren't deserving of it. Now, naturally, there will be some cases from time to time. A team like in Oklahoma that faces off against 4 teams ranked number 1 and they beat 2 of them. Yeah, okay. They belong in the playoff because of their schedule was tested by that. But an 8-4 roster that just gets on in because they wear the SEC logo or they have the badge of the Big Ten doesn't warrant a playoff spot, in my opinion. And all you're going to do is at this point make it a popularity contest of which logo is going to bring in more revenue. So therefore, when we go ahead and do our 24 team ranking, we'll guarantee that they're in the game. So that way we'll get the most eyeballs attached to it. So unfortunately, I do think that we are going to see expansion again. I believe it will be 16. And then eventually, maybe 10 years from now, it'll be 24. But the reality is that there aren't 24 teams that can win a national title. The only thing that we're really doing with this is just making sure that we get more revenue to people who are in charge of the sport, money that we will never see. And we're probably still going to find a way to mess it on up because what we'll say is instead of having home playoff games, we'll still do that in the first round. Everybody's playing in the first round. But then in round 2, well, now we're going to go take away the Gator Bowl. Well, now we're going to go take away the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Those are now going to be playoff games. So you just continue the trend of having a bigger environment for a smaller capacity of seating. So that way your revenue distribution gets on in and your boosters and all of your marketing people aren't pissed off by you. Because sponsorship is really what matters at the end of the day, right?
The thing that made college football so unique was it was a blend of deserving and best. And by going to 24, like you talked about Miami, we all knew they could go on a run. But did they really deserve to be in the playoff? Right. And with an 8-team playoff, I just said, no, they're not one of the best 8 teams in the country. Well, they're not one of the most deserving 8 teams in the country. What you are going to do is you are going to give elite, talented rosters mulligans like crazy, like Texas. Teams that lost and should not have been in. You're going to give teams like that mulligans. You're not really changing who can win. What made college football so unique is you guys keep saying it. Can 24 teams win the national championship? No. Can 64 teams win the national championship in basketball? No. Can whatever the number is, 14 NFL teams win it? Closer, but still no. Right? The NFC South still exists. So can 16 NHL teams win it? No. Can 16 NBA teams win it? No. The Champions League is I think there's 32 World Cup teams this year coming up, which I'm trying to go to a game. I was texting Cole about it the other day. There are not 32 countries that can win the World Cup. There's 5, but we still let them in. College football was unique in that standpoint, where it wasn't everybody gets in, everybody gets a trophy, everybody gets a ribbon. We're eventually going to lose that, right? Yeah. And it will become like every other sport. The same teams will still be the same teams. They can win it. You might see a team go on a run. Maybe a Virginia wins 2 games in the playoff and then gets demolished by whoever, Oregon or whatever. But we are changing it to basically be like every other sport because again, there aren't 64 teams that can win college basketball. There aren't 14 teams that can win the NFL Super Bowl. Yeah. But we're basically just going to do what everybody else does, and that sucks because we're all kind of traditionalists. And so,
congratulations, college football! You have turned yourself into the NFL, something that we all begged you never to do.
Yeah, we're getting closer and closer daily. So, all right, last thing here today. The portal is closed, but the portal is never really closed. Yeah. Tom sent us a link, just another podcast, which I don't have the name of it, Tom, if you want to shout it out.
McCready and Siski.
Yeah. Yeah. The new offensive coordinator for the Birmingham Stallions for under A.J. McCarron.
So the portal is closed right now. His point was when May rolls around and spring is done everywhere, when Xavier Lucas transferred from Wisconsin to Miami, well, didn't transfer, unenrolled from Wisconsin and enrolled at Miami. At that time, was that about a year ago? Was it even more? I think it was before we started the show.
Last offseason, yeah.
I said, boy, this is going to happen over and over and over and again. And I was wrong about that because it didn't. I'm shocked that more of this hasn't happened, to be very honest with you. What they said on the podcast was, buckle up, this is coming, more of it's going to happen. This is the first year we don't have a spring window, if I'm correct. Last year we did have a spring window. I would be shocked if it doesn't happen multiple times after this spring window, which obviously implies the portal or the tampering aspect is not going away. None of that is. Do you agree with it? Do you think it's about to get crazy, or do you think that we'll have lawsuits? Where do you think this is going? Tom, you shared it, so I'll let you go first.
I think it's going to depend on the conference because Xavier Lucas set off a ripple effect within the Big Ten. Wisconsin and the Big Ten, if you recall, got on this in a big way.
Right.
And That's part of why you saw the quick action with Damon Williams Jr. out at Washington, and that he was like, "Oh, I'm re-signing," and then a couple days later, "I'm transferring to LSU," or "I'm hopping in the portal." And they showed him the contract and said, "The hell you are! Here's the buyout money that you would owe us." My question is not, will this happen? I think this is definitely going to happen. It's a question of which conference really gets hit by it. Is the Big Ten ahead of the curve here? And have they written in language with all of their student athletes that it says like, hey, if you drop out of school, you owe us the remainder or whatever? And that might be very different. And Damon Williams Jr. is obviously very high profile. Your starting quarterback is your, reserve long snapper going to have the same thing in his contract? That remains to be seen. I have a feeling that you might not see a lot of this in the Big Ten, but Cole was pointing to himself. I have a feeling you might see a good deal of this in the SEC and other conferences if they don't have that language figured out with these contracts.
The thing that I'm going to be paying attention to is it going to be interconferencing as well? Because that would be another major issue. I'll give you a perfect example. We're still awaiting the results of the Joey Aguilar case. Joey Aguilar still has not been told if he is officially cleared to return in 2026. So let's just say he's not. There is a battle going on down in Tuscaloosa between Austin Mack and Keelan Russell for QB1. If one of them ends up getting told, you're our starter going into fall camp, who's to say that Tennessee, with Faison Brandon, who is a very, very good prospect, a top 3 quarterback prospect in this year's recruiting class, or George McIntyre, a guy that you may have hope for, but you're not entirely sold on, who's to say that Josh Heupel doesn't go into the portal and figure out a way to go bring the loser of the Tuscaloosa battle up to Tennessee? And then what will Greg Sankey stay at that point? Because he's been oddly quiet about, what's going on between LSU and Ole Miss. Ole Miss, they signed contracts with Prince Wotu and Manley Ellen and TJ Daugherty. Oh, but Lane Kiffin wants him. So there was arguments on that one. Yet when you go out and bring in the Clemson linebacker, everyone's up in arms about it. So I'll be intrigued to see, is there going to be interconference battles? Will there be post-conference battles? God bless if the Big 12 loses a high-profile quarterback to, say, a team in the SEC or the Big 10. But, Brett Yormark will be on a tirade of annoyance about what that is. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be, I think, an interesting battle. You are right. Just because the portal is closed, it doesn't mean it's closed. And just because if you're told you're ineligible does not mean technically you are ineligible. So this could be a battle that continuously goes on. How it affects the rest of the world of college football is going to be interesting. If it doesn't, though, maybe we can all take a giant exhale and say, well, at least college football has gotten one thing right. One portal window, one stipulation for you to be able to go on in and enter and go to a new school. I will be thankful that right now the people who are in charge of college football do a lot of things wrong, but at least they were able to stand under their guns on this one.
Don't count out programs like Miami, Ole Miss, LSU that you guys just mentioned. Like, if they feel like they have holes they need to plug, you may not love it for the sport. I don't. I'll say that. Like, I don't love it for the sport. But if you're one of those programs that's here to here trying to get a little bit better, yeah, I don't expect Florida State to go out and grab 17 guys out of the portal, or not out of the portal, but just transfers, right? Like, is it worth the risk at that point? And how much of a difference maker are you getting that wants to do that? But man, if you're one of those programs that's kind of teetering and guys lose out on battles, you mentioned the Alabama one, Cole. Guys lose out on battles that were like neck and neck for a job. I just would be very surprised if this isn't something that, if it's an opportunity that coaches have to make their roster better and there's no guardrails and there's no rules and nobody's saying don't do it, I think it's going to happen. I kind of hope it doesn't. I'd kind of like to see a little bit of normalcy, but I'm past the point of thinking that that's reality in this sport.
By the way, Canada just came back to win. So
I saw it went to overtime.
Yep.
Do they go 3-on-3 overtimes in that, or is it just? I
think they moved it to 3-on-3.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, Mitch Marner scored the game-winning goal.
Bring them on, but not really.
We hate you, Sweden. Let's figure it out.
If any of our Swedish viewership is going to tank down below 0.1%.
Point it at me. I will never come to Stockholm. It's okay.
Because of Cole.
I will stay away from there in Oslo.
If you watch this, we would appreciate if you'd hit the subscribe button. We do this live once a week, typically on Wednesdays, sometimes on Mondays, sometimes on Sunday nights. So you never know with us. But if you're subscribed and you have the alerts bell on, then you never have to guess. Appreciate you guys for hanging out. TJ Pittinger, Cole Thompson, Tom Hannifan. Search for us on social media and argue with Cole there. We appreciate you guys. We'll talk to you soon on the Power 2.